Right, for his analysis on a very hectic day in Canberra and that net zero debate that's still running on, I'm joined from Sydney by the editor-at-large of the Australian newspaper, Mr Paul Kelly. Paul, great to have you on the show. Tonight we're told Barnaby Joyce, pretty imminent I think, is handing over the National Party's list of demands to the Prime Minister. He's still talking with his troops. It's now going to all be in writing for the PM's consideration. We're told they'll be asking for changes to land use laws and legislation governing development approvals on top of money for the regions and many other things. How do you see it all playing out from here on in?
Well, that's the $64,000
It's a crystal ball question, isn't it, that one?
Yeah. I guess a lot will depend upon the nature of the demands being made by the National Party, the extent to which, you know, they're really putting in inflated demands that have got no chance of getting up, the extent to which they're being realistic. But I think at the end of the day, there's been a good working relationship between Scott Morrison and Barnaby Joyce. So my judgment would be that there will be an agreement, there will be a settlement which will enable a majority of the National Party, but not the whole National Party, to come on board, and then there'll be a cabinet decision.
Do you think anyone will have the guts out of this process to put nuclear? I'm not saying go ahead and announce prior to the election that there'll be a nuclear power industry for Australia, but at least have the debate, public consultations, maybe an expert panel sometime soon, perhaps after the election. Do you think it'll be on the table at least?
Well, we'll see if the National Party puts that nuclear debate in their list, which they give to Scott Morrison. I mean, I won't predict what the National Party will ask for, but I would say the judgment of the Prime Minister is clearly that he does not want a debate about nuclear power before the election, simply because there's clearly a major conflict between the government and Labor on that issue, and I don't think he wants to elevate that into an election issue. It would clearly create a problem for his nuclear submarine deal, his nuclear-powered submarine deal with the US and the UK, because the domestic foundation for that is that there's no civil nuclear industry developed in Australia, and that's the foundation for bipartisan support. So there would be problems for Scott Morrison doing anything about nuclear power before the election.
Yeah, look, I'm mindful of the fact that this is a coalition asking for a fourth term. You've got the government behind by a factor of 5 seats, retirements, redistribution in some states that have gone against them. But you don't win elections by being just a paler version of the other side. I mean, he's got to create some differences with Labor, and if he's only going to put forward an agenda at the next election where it's either a pragmatic appeasement on some issues, 2050 net zero is one of those, or it's areas where they're in furious agreement, what's the reason to re-elect Scott Morrison?
Well, I think Scott Morrison will run on the economy. That's going to be his major election pitch.
Yeah, but the greatest debt numbers in peacetime history. Greatest debt numbers in peacetime history.
I don't think that's going to be a terribly damaging issue for the government, just in terms of the scale of debt. What he'll talk about is the recovery coming out of COVID. I think the economy and spending in the economy is going to grow particularly strongly over the course of the next 6 months. So I think the economic environment sort of running up till next March, April, May could be a particularly strong and favourable one for the government. The economy is where the government will have a very substantial lead over Labor. I think, to take up your question, it would have been smarter for the Prime Minister to take a couple of cultural issues where he could have exacerbated the differences with Labor and run on them. One would be school curriculum, which I saw Alan Tudge speak about in the Parliament today. Another one would be identity politics, which Scott Morrison has referred to in the past but hasn't actually elevated into a frontline election issue. He doesn't want to do that. But I think in terms of the pressure on the base, I think the pressure on the coalition base means that it would have been advisable for him to do a little bit more on those issues.